Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar on functional movements and circuits for one-on-one and small group training clients. Happy that you're all here and going to learn a little bit about training our older clients, and glad to see some familiar names on the list, some of our advanced clients that have come through and visited our facility, and others who I know have taken the certification or in the middle of taking the certification or I've seen you at workshops. So good to have all of you, and if I haven't met you, then just want to introduce myself real quick. My name is Cody. I'm the co-founder of the Functional Aging Institute and have been working with older adults for a while now. I also have a kind of a real job, as I say, as a professor in a physical therapy program, and I run our research program as well here at Harding University, and focus on older adults. But today, when we go through this content, we're really just going to look at how to apply some functional training circuits for clients, whether working with them in a one-on-one type of environment or in a small group environment. And of course, for those of you who know a lot about kind of what we promote for businesses and for trainers out there, you know that we are big proponents of small group training, and so we'll talk about that a little bit, how to do that, how to make it successful, and how circuits fit into that, and I'll explain really what I mean by circuits as well. I've been really surprised at the response of my presentation on functional circuits that I've done at some of the major conferences over the past few months, and it's always been surprisingly one of my most popular sessions, and get a lot of interest in it. And I think just probably because there's just a lot of interest in circuit training. You know, a lot of other programs and branded programs have really done a good job in promoting their circuit training, and so I just want to make sure as we go through that you understand kind of what I talk about, what I mean when I talk about circuit training. If you haven't visited our website, which I'm sure you already have, I want to encourage you to go there at functionalaginginstitute.com and check out the programs that we have to offer for learning how to train clients. I know a lot of you are already going through our certifications, and if you haven't yet, you know, I'm going to cover some basic information so that you know kind of where I'm coming from and you see our perspective. But really, if you want to learn this stuff from the inside out, then I'm really going to recommend that you take our Functional Aging Specialist certification. I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But let's just kind of jump in really quick with talking about some basics of, well, why functional circuits for aging clients? Why is it that we want to focus on the circuits? Well, we can look at it from a number of different kind of perspectives, and I'm just going to focus on four very, very quickly. One is the opportunity. You know, there are a lot of mature adults out there. That's a humongous percentage of the population. It's growing every day. You've probably heard me tout the numbers of, you know, about 10,000 boomers turn 65 every day. It is a ginormous cohort of clients, and there's a huge opportunity for you to position yourself as an expert in functional aging and to really grow your business, grow your revenue, and serve a lot of people really, really well. And that's certainly something that's very important for us is you need to have a business that you are very proud of, you know, that you are delivering a product and a service that is making people's lives better. And that's why a lot of us are in the fitness industry to begin with, right? I mean, we want to improve people's lives, but at the same time, we want to make a good living out of this. And there's no reason why you can't make a good living, especially if you focus on this clientele, this rapidly growing aging clientele. There are just so many people who in the fitness industry who just are not attuned to this at all, and we're starting to see that mindset shift. You know, the paradigm is starting to shift because the boomer population is demanding so much attention, but still in the industry you can see it. You know, I talk to people about, you know, this opportunity, and they'll agree with you and say, oh yeah, but then they're going to go right back to doing their same old thing and working with the 20 and 30-year-olds. So a lot of opportunity for you to get in now and really establish yourself and help a lot of people. And I think functional circuits are a great way to tap into that market, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as we kind of go through. The second thing is really programming diversity, and then another thing that we'll go into a little bit more detail about. But when you are working with this population, and those of you that are, you understand the diversity that's here. I mean, it is the most diverse population, or age group, I should say, of any other age group. We have people who are in their 60s and can barely walk across a room and can barely, bend over to tie their shoes, hardly take care of themselves. And you have people in their 80s who are at an elite level. I was just today I was looking at something that came through Facebook, and an article and video about a woman who's 77 years old, and she's doing deadlifting and competing, and we see that sort of individual. Unfortunately, they are rarer than we would like them to be, but that shows that diversity. That 77-year-old woman could kick the butt of a lot of 60-year-olds, right? And so there's everything in between. So these functional circuits really help us to reach a wider variety of individuals at different levels of function and health when they come in. It's also very efficient. Our training sessions at our facility, Miracles Fitness, we've been running that for about 7 years now. We do probably about half of our business, if you want to call it that. Half of our business is small group training. Half of it is one-on-one. And whether we're doing one-on-one or small group training, we're doing 30-minute sessions. It makes our training very efficient. We still get everything that we want done, that we want to accomplish, because you can accomplish a lot in a short amount of time if you're eliminating a lot of unnecessary rest periods, or if you are working on something, an aspect of their function that's low intensity in between higher intensity types of movements. And so when we go through our circuits and some of the examples, I'll show you how we kind of mix that up, where we'll vary between certain aspects of function that we're working on and on different intensity levels, and et cetera, so that we can get a lot in a short amount of time and really keep it moving. It's very efficient, lots of energy. And that's where the group dynamic comes in. It really creates a fun social atmosphere. It's very interactive. People are always laughing and smiling, and of course they're still sweating and grunting and groaning as they exert themselves. But the group dynamic and the efficiency of the programming really makes the session fly by, and people really enjoy it. So that's really just a few reasons why we employ a lot of functional circuits, and why I think they can be very successful if you work with older adults and want to really focus on that. So for those of you who haven't gone through our course yet, I'm just going to do a quick overview of our functional aging training model, our approach to training, so that you're on the same page as everybody else is when we're looking at the movements and the approach and the circuits that we've put together. So for those of you who have gone through this already, this will just be a good refresher, a good review. And hopefully you'll still learn some bits and pieces maybe that you haven't heard before. Our model is really based on another model, and this is a pretty old model. It's called the Nagi Disablement model, and it basically is a model that explains, okay, if we take somebody who's disabled and we kind of backwards engineer the process and say, how did they get there? And if we know kind of how they get there, how does a person end up being disabled? If we backwards engineer that, we can figure out what to do to prevent that from occurring in the first place. So we'll start just kind of on the left side of the model, and that is, it usually starts with either a disease of some sort, chronic disease condition, or it starts with inactivity, a really, really poor lifestyle. Now, of course, those two things feed off each other, right? I mean, if you are inactive, you are more likely to develop arthritis or obesity or cardiovascular disease or diabetes or whatever. Okay, at the same time, if you have an active pathology, if you have a disease, that tends to make you less active, right? If you have arthritis and it's painful, then people tend to become less active. And so over time, so this is always over a long period of time, and really enmeshed with the aging process itself. Okay, so with disease pathology or inactivity over a long period of time as we get older, that can then start to lead to impairments. So impairments are all the things in fitness that we really like to focus on. It's things like muscle strength or flexibility, range of motion, it would be cardiovascular endurance. It's all the kind of the things in fitness that we like to measure, right? Well, as those impairments start to worsen, eventually they're going to start to impact our function, our ability to do tasks in life, whether it's, carrying groceries and climbing stairs, doing a work of some sort, playing tennis or playing golf. It's going to start to impact our function. And function, obviously, is really what we're all about. Is we want to maintain high levels of function. Now, as function then starts to worsen, eventually somebody becomes so functionally limited then that they cannot fulfill their socially defined roles, and so that they are considered then disabled. So if I am kind of the breadwinner for the family and I'm the worker, if I can't fulfill that role, then I would be considered to be disabled. And there's a lot of different types of disability. It can be mental disability or emotional disability. We're really focused on physical disability here. So when we look at this process, then we want to focus on how do we maintain the highest level of function that we possibly can as we get older. Because even if we think about no disease or pathology, if we think about a person living an okay lifestyle, they're appropriately active, well, the aging process can be a bummer, and it can still catch up with us. And so, we see things like, muscle strength and power going down, and VO2 max going down, even for people that are active. And so we've learned a lot from studies on masters athletes who are very, very active, right? And they're eating well and they're sleeping well. They're doing all the right things from a lifestyle perspective. They have very little disease or pathology that's present. But yet we see their performance still declining over the decades, right? The aging process is still there and still working. Okay, so when we think about that, then we just need to remember that we can't do everything to stop the aging process, obviously. Okay, and that can lead to functional limitations. So when we look at the research, what's really interesting is that strength has gotten a lot of focus, and muscle mass has gotten a lot of the focus of a lot of the aging research. And when we look into it, what we see is that really standard strength training is not the savior that we thought it was. It is not the kind of the fountain of youth that we thought it was. It's very helpful, yes it is, okay, but it doesn't solve our functional problems as we get older, okay, for everyone. And the reason, in my opinion, is I kind of look at the research evidence and kind of as a whole, in totality, we see that there are a lot of different factors that are important for functioning, okay, beyond just muscle strength. And so here's a list of just some of those factors that are very important in order to attain what we might consider max function, right? And then maintain that for a long period of time. So strength is certainly on the list, but we've got to look at what about muscle power. I'm a big proponent of muscle power. The research is very clear in that muscle power is more important than muscle strength when it comes to function. And then we look at all these other aspects of endurance and coordination. What about motor control? What about somatic sensation? On and on and on it goes, right? So when we consider all these factors, then our approach has got to be that we're going to focus on a lot of these factors, if not all of them. Now, not everyone is going to have the same need for these factors. For example, somebody might have a big deficit in muscle strength, and so they need to focus on that. Well, somebody else might not have such a need to focus on muscle strength because their strength is okay, right? So we'll look at, well, in our circuit program, how do we adapt the individual needs of the client to match up with all these functional factors that we're focused on? And we say this is complicated, right? It's difficult to think about juggling all of these in a program and then also progressing all of them appropriately. But that's okay. It's okay that it's difficult, but because it's worth it. And we see that when you focus on this kind of panorama of functional factors and you really address them appropriately, then function really goes up. Okay, and so we've got this huge variability in function as people get older, because people have a huge variability in their impairment level factors, right? What is their impairment? Well, again, it might be one or two things for somebody, it might be 10 things for somebody else. What we see in kind of the aging process is we see kind of one of two paths occurring with individuals. Usually they might have one factor that is impaired to a significant degree, right? And if that one factor is impaired significantly, then function goes down significantly, right? That one factor being pretty much wiped out really has a drastic impact on function. You think about strength. Well, if you completely took away somebody's strength, well, yeah, obviously that's going to drastically impact their function. Okay, but then what we also see, and this is what we see more commonly, that as people get older, a myriad of functional factors start to decline. They all start to drop off, and this is the aging process, the biological aging process that's affecting these. And so usually we see people that have deficits in lots of things across the board, and there isn't necessarily one thing that stands out that says, okay, if I fix that, I'm good, right? So we need to, of course, then address this myriad of factors for individuals. And again, depending on whether you're in a one-on-one environment or a small group or a large group environment will determine how you implement those factors. And so for our types of programming, and for our focus, especially for the functional aging specialist certification, what we really focus on is kind of this frail, independent, and fit older adult. That's where we're going to get really a big bang for our buck when it comes to implementing these functional aging programs. The elite athlete is they're kind of their own little group, and there's some special things about them. And then also if someone's dependent and they're already disabled, then there's some, again, special considerations that have to be made for them. So really the frail, independent, and fit individuals who we want to focus on. And that's okay, because that's the majority of people. Honestly, the majority of this booming population is in the frail to fit category. So lots of opportunity there. So I usually tell people that, our functional aging training model is, it's where functional training meets the physiology of aging. And so I just want to cover really quickly our principles that we employ in this model, and then we'll move on to really applying this for different situations. So here are 7 key principles that we built this model on. So ideally, we'd really like to be able to assess, prioritize, and then train all components of function. Now, again, depending on your situation, you might not be able to assess. If you're in a group environment or you're in a big gym environment, then you might not have the capability to employ these assessments. And so then there's a kind of another way that we need to address these components of function. Making purposeful decisions for every aspect of training, because we really want to make sure that we're hitting all those components of function in a very effective and purposeful manner. We're going to integrate movement patterns to prepare for those functional demands. That's triplanar training then. We want to think about all planes of human motion, the sagittal, frontal, transverse combinations of those for functional demands, really including isolation type exercise movements as supplementary to the routine rather than complementary. And you'll see that we use isolation type movements when they're necessary, when they are purposeful, okay, in order to assist with function for an individual. But the isolated type exercise movement program as a whole is not what we're looking to accomplish. And again, that's where a lot of the strength training studies have focused on, is those isolation type programs. We want to perform exercises in a seated position only when we need to, and it serves a very specific purpose, such as they're fatigued, they might fall down, they can't stand up. Those are all purposeful reasons for using seated exercise. Or there might be something about the exercise itself which necessitates sitting down. But really, movement is life. That's how we maintain our function is by being mobile. Order the session according to energy level, so we do more complicated stuff, high energy stuff earlier in the program, and then later in the program we can do some of those more isolated type movements, or we can do the floor work closer to the end, because we don't want to do an agility ladder type exercise at the end of their routine when they're already tired, obviously, because then there's a higher chance that they're going to fall or trip and hurt themselves and even get frustrated with the activity because they just don't have the mental focus to stay with it. And then maximize client safety and success by really looking at training holistically, and that is looking at the other 23 and a half hours of their life that they're not with you, and giving them advice and making sure that you're doing what's appropriate, all the other hours when you don't see them, but then also within the session itself, really being holistic about your approach. So those are really the 7 key principles to our training model. So let's get into how do we apply this in different situations. Well, I have what I call a GPS approach to applying the functional aging training model, depending upon kind of your situation and kind of where you are. So if you're doing large group classes and programming, then you really can't go through all these individual assessments. You can't really learn the individual needs of your clients. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to then just take a more generalized approach, and that is we look back at those functional domains that we've already talked about, looking at power and velocity and motor control, coordination, etc. And within your programming, covering as many of those as possible. Now that doesn't mean you have to cover every single thing with every single session, but that does mean that you need to have a broad mix of these integrated into your program, so that we're not just have an 80% focus on strength, a 10% focus on motor control, and then a hodgepodge for the other 10%. We really need to think, and again, it doesn't have to be equally. We don't have to think about, okay, 10% this and 10% this and 10% this, but we do need to address those in a broad kind of program strategy. And so I like to use it as a checklist, to really, when you write your exercise programs down and you script them, to then look at that and say, okay, what am I hitting? What am I hitting heavy? What am I hitting light? What am I not getting much of at all? And now, of course, some exercise movements, because of the way they're designed, the way they're set up, is you hit multiple of those domains, right? But some you're going to hit more than others. So if we're going to say we're going to do chair stands, right, out of a chair, well, that is primarily a strength exercise. Now we can make it a power exercise by doing it really high velocity and explosively. So how you do it will determine kind of what aspect you're really focusing on. Okay, but if you say, oh, well, that's motor control, it takes motor control and coordination to get out of a chair. Yeah, but really not much. I mean, that's really, really minor. That's not the purpose of the exercise. It's really not going to challenge motor control coordination very much. So, be realistic about it and look at, okay, what areas am I really hitting on and which areas am I missing? And that right there will just help you develop better programs overall that are more functionally effective. Now, of course, in a small group environment, and so we'll talk about small group and what that means, but really I mean personal training with anywhere from 3 to 6 clients. Typically our groups that we use are 4 to 6. We like that sweet spot of 4 to 6. That works really, really well from a client interaction, programming, kind of standpoint, and with the area that we have, etc. But in that type of environment, it really is still personal or personalized training. So in that case, you can do one of two things. Again, depending on your environment. So in our environment, when people come in for training and we're going to put them in a small group, we go through a full assessment battery with them. Right? We get to know them very intimately as far as what are their needs, what are their desires, what are their limitations when it comes to exercise. And so then the trainer who's leading that small group can focus on those individual needs for those 4 to 6 clients. Okay, so that way it still remains very personal and personalized. Okay, Now, if you're in a small group training environment in which you don't do all that intake and assessment, well, one, I would suggest that you think about how to redesign your programming so that you can do those, because that connection with that client increases tenfold when you go through that process, okay? And you're going to retain them longer if you take the time to invest that time and energy into that client. You'll get that back tenfold. But if you don't do that, then what you do is you kind of you group people according to their kind of general functional level. So people don't have to be at the exact same functional level, but what you don't want is you don't want somebody who's down at the low end of frail, who's about to become dependent, and someone at the high end of fit, right? Those don't work very well together in the same group. And we've learned that from experience and over time, that it's best to have people that are at least similar in their functional capabilities. And so if you group them that way, you group them with some sort of characteristics, then without knowing their individual needs, just based on those characteristics that they need certain things more than other things, right? So as an example, you'll see in our low kind of function circuits, if people are at a low functional level, then there is a much higher focus on basic strength and mobility than there is with a higher function group, okay? There also might be a higher focus on basic balance skills and even static balance versus dynamic balance. So so just by knowing the characteristics of the group you're working with, you can at least prioritize the functional areas so that you are getting at their needs a little bit more specifically, even without knowing their individualized needs. So of course then the kind of highest touch, highest level of training then would be specialized training. And so that is where you're working one-on-one with a client, you know their needs, or you're in a small group, but you've done all the assessment, you've done all the work to know what their individual needs are. And so then you can tailor everything according to what their needs are. And then you can progress them according to their own individual capabilities as they go through their training program, according to the effort they give and how well they respond to the training, etc. So you can really focus on their needs. Now, of course, that requires that you go through a lot of functional assessment and really learn where their deficits are and where their strengths are. And if you go through our functional aging specialist certification, you learn some of those key assessments that you can use to figure that out. All right, so that's kind of the GPS approach. And so you see how the functional circuits are applied differently according to your kind of environment that you're working with, whether it's large group, small group with all the individualized assessment, or one-on-one with individualized assessment. Okay, so you can kind of determine what your situation is and how you could apply this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about small group personal training, because I really want this to be defined. This can help your business immensely. If you are not focused on small group, you need to do it. We are working with a number of our coaching clients right now, kind of forcing them into making the leap into small group training, and they're all just reporting so much positive that's coming from that business-wise from the training. And so I really want to encourage you, if you do not know how to really employ small group personal training, feel free to contact us for more information. Come see us at one of the conferences or workshops that we're doing. We're happy to talk to you about that some more. And then, of course, you can always, there's a number of people who are out there, I think, doing small group personal training really well that you can learn from as well. But just kind of as an example, one of our clients, coaching clients who's out in California, she purchased a kind of a circuit facility for women. It was a ladies only circuit facility, kind of like a Curves, but it wasn't a Curves, and kind of came from another industry, another sector, really didn't know a lot about how to set up a fitness business, and was just, when we started talking about developing a small group training model, she was just like, no, it's just not going to work. My ladies are set in their ways, and I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I don't have the space. And so we really did kind of force her into making the change and just say, look, trust us, this is going to work, it's going to work well. And so we just got a Facebook message, email from her just the other day, which said, hey, I just did my end of the month, looking at my revenue. I've been averaging $5,000 a month, kind of doing this whole, circuit thing. And now I'm doing the small group personal training circuit that we recommended. And a revenue jumped from $5,000 a month to $15,000. So really big increase in revenue in her, and that's really nice. But you see that this small group personal training really hits a kind of on a lot of different levels with the mature client, and we'll talk about some of those here in just a minute. But it's not just large group exercise. It really is personal training or personalized training with a small group of clients that can really help your bottom line and really help to deliver a great product and service for your clients. So why do it? Well, there's a number of advantages for the kind of the three groups that are invested. Okay, one, the facility, right? If you are an owner of a facility, then driving more revenue, and of course driving profitable revenue is very important for you as an owner, right? So small group training really helps to drive a lot more revenue in a small amount of space. Your members stay longer. Your trainers stay longer because it's very enjoyable for them, as we'll see, and really a lot of opportunity there. Plus, there is a different client that's out there. We keep saying this over and over again. This mature client that doesn't go to these gyms or goes to big box gyms, gets turned off by them, and turns around and walks out the door. And we see this time and time again where people will come into our facility after just having joined another facility and gone in and say, I wanted to commit to fitness. I thought I could do it. I just can't stand the environment. I don't get any help. I don't feel comfortable with those, personal trainers, et cetera, et cetera. You probably see this, duplicated as you look around in your area that you're living in. There really is an opportunity to tap into that different clientele. For the trainer, it's great because the trainer's going to get paid more. The workouts are much more efficient. They're quick 30-minute workouts. They really have to be on their toes, and so they are much more engaged in the training programs, I think, than even working with one-on-one client, because you can't let your guard down. You can't look away. And I tell people, I admit this to people, that I've done personal training. I'm not a good personal trainer. I'm really not, because I get really bored, to be honest. I cannot stand watching someone just, say, okay, do 12 of these, and I'm trying to watch them, trying to stay engaged and watch their form and correct them, and, but I cannot stay engaged for a really long period of time. But when I'm working in a small group, when I've got 4 to 6 clients, I've got to constantly switch from person to person, really stay on my toes, and I rip through a 30-minute training session, and I'll rip through 2 or 3 or 4, and I will feel so much better because I've been engaged, the time has flown by, and I haven't been as bored. So, if that's you, I'm sure some trainers, identify with that, but that was me, and so the small group really helps me. Plus, you can reach a lot more people with your expertise, and that's why small group is so valuable, because when you look at the client, well, it doesn't cost as much per session. They still get, that personalized instruction more than they do in a large group or on their own. And for many of them, it's just not intimidating for them to join a group because it's not as personal. I don't know how many people I've talked to over the years that they don't want to do one-on-one training because that's like too intimate. It's too personal. It's kind of the people who want to sit in the back of the auditorium all the time, or, if they don't want to walk up front if they walk in late to something, because everybody's looking at them. They want to kind of blend in. And so in that small group environment, the tension isn't just on them, it's on the others as well. So they can slide into that much more readily and feel more comfortable in that environment. Then still get all that one-on-one help that they need, plus that social interaction that comes from the group. So, from the facility standpoint, from the trainer standpoint, from the client standpoint, it really is a winner. And when we think about this mature client, we also have to think about kind of the social and emotional aspects of small group personal training. I mean, I really do think there are so many distinct advantages to the small group environment for this population specifically. And I'm kind of a mature market junkie at this point, and that is, I'm trying to find as much about this market that I can, how they think, how they act, what their values are, what really drives their behavior, what keeps them engaged in fitness. And they are kind of all over the place, but there are several things that really stand out, and that is that they really want to be in a place in which they feel comfortable. They don't want that emotional risk to be there. They want to develop confidence, and a lot of people have zero confidence in their ability to exercise. And so, they join places and go in and work out and never develop that confidence, that self-efficacy that they feel like they, can do it on their own. And I work out right now at a facility that is just kind of one of those facilities that's open for 24-hour access, and that's where I work out, because our university, rec center isn't anything great, so I work out in town. And I like to watch people, and I really like to watch the older clients that come in, and it's difficult because they really don't know what they're doing. And we get so many clients in our facility at Miracles Fitness that are coming to work out for the very first time. They've never exercised before in their life, or they did something when they were younger, haven't picked it up in years. And so a lot of people in this age group are now really being drawn to fitness if it's the right kind of fitness for them. And that self-confidence is really important to build, and we can do that in the small group environment very well. We really get to know these people, and so those relationships grow. If you're a one-on-one trainer or a group trainer, that's something that you try to do anyway, right? And you probably have a good rapport and you develop good relationships. But I really do think there's something even more powerful that occurs relationship-wise in a small group training type of environment. I think there's a closeness and a bond that occurs there that's pretty significant and pretty valuable. It's also a lot of fun, and while I don't track, kind of member retention from an industry perspective, I try to keep up on what's happening in the small group training realm in the industry, and listening to some of the other who I'll call them kind of gurus and business gurus in the industry. I think there's a general consensus that the small group personal training is leading to higher satisfaction and retention numbers than what we see with either one-on-one or large groups. So a lot of good benefits there. So when we think about kind of the small group environment, I like to kind of harken back to the Cheers show. And if some of you might remember Cheers, and I watched Cheers when I was kind of in middle school. That was a great show for me to kind of stay up late at night and watch. I loved it. And the little jingle about Cheers, was a bar, but the little jingle was where everybody knows your name, and they kind of sang that song. And I think about that from a group perspective. That's what people want. They want to be known. And so there's a power of this, of kind of the group aspect, in which people feel like they become accountable and responsible for something larger than themselves, that doesn't necessarily occur during one-on-one training, and may or may not happen during large group training, because people can kind of slip through the cracks, come and go. They can be anonymous. You can't be anonymous in small group training. So when we think about that group idea, is really in our small group programs, we cannot have just a collection of 4 to 6 individuals. We need to really develop that group mentality, in that bond and that relationship, and facilitate that in our kind of programming. So I just want to throw that out there because that's something that's very important for us, and is really, I think, important for, I want to say, mature clients as a whole. As I kind of look at the data and read a lot of surveys about what they want and what they feel and what they value, is that this group idea is really, really important. So, of course, there are some challenges of small group personal training that I won't go into a lot of detail about, but these are definitely challenges that you need to keep up with and that you need to be mindful of if you're starting a small group training program, or if you're trying to really increase and magnify the success of your current small group training program. You've got to deal with these barriers and these issues, and make sure that each one of these are addressed appropriately if you want to be successful. So let's go into now functional circuits and really look at how we want to apply these in these different types of environments. So I think there are some big keys to keeping these circuits successful. One is to keep the purpose functional, and that obviously is going to have a lot of different interpretations depending on where you're coming from. From my perspective, it is functional is really relative, right? It's relative to that group, to those people that you're working with. And so in the grand scheme of what's functional, I don't think of exercises as being either functional or not functional. I think about them along a continuum where for an individual in a situation, some exercises are more functional than others. I like to use the example of, a bicep curl. And I think most of us would say, well, a bicep curl, that's not really that functional. Why would I just focus on a bicep curl? But yet for that older individual who really struggles in lifting objects such as groceries and luggage and whatnot, because their biceps are weak, then the bicep curl might be pretty functional for them, right? For someone who has adequate bicep strength, getting just bigger, stronger biceps probably isn't going to impact their function very much, okay? So it obviously is dependent, but really, really focus on your functional objectives for that group and keep it functional. As an example, we have one or two groups that specifically do a lot of metabolic training in their circuit. It's a very metabolic circuit. But for most of our clients, we don't do metabolic training in those circuits. As far as we might do some, but it's just not the primary focus of what we do, because the purpose is to keep it functional, and so we want to focus on that. Next is match the movements to the client's abilities. I do not like to use the kind of word modify or using modifications. We don't modify exercises. We match the appropriate exercise movement, how to do it, and the right equipment, with the right stance, with the right arm pattern, with the right whatever, in order to meet the client's abilities. Okay, so it's not a modification. Just because Bob does it one way and Susan does it another way doesn't mean we've modified it for Susan, right? Susan is doing it the way Susan needs to do it for Susan. Bob is going to do it the way Bob needs to do it for Bob. So this whole idea of modifications, which really kind of developed from group exercise, in which you throw out one exercise, and then you say, okay, if you can do it this way, do it this way. If you can't, then do it this way. You modify it according to your abilities. Well, we're not modifying anything. Okay, we are matching the movements to their abilities, and I think that's just a different shift, a different paradigm, a way to think about it. That's more than just terminology. It really is about your approach. I already mentioned this one is really group clients with similar functional abilities, so they're not on different ends of the spectrums. Make sure you're addressing a broad mix of functional domains. We all have pet exercise movements that we like and we like to do. Your clients will have things that they like to do and things that they don't like to do. Well, you know what? All that needs to be subservient to the broader goal of function, okay? So I need to make sure that I don't keep falling into the same kind of pattern and missing out on these functional domains that I need to focus on. And then the last thing, of course, is really being safe at all times. The thing about working with obviously older adults in a small group environment is having to keep up with 4 to 6 clients. And think about it, if you're working on balance exercises, the only way to improve balance is to push them to the limits of their balance ability, which means they're likely going to become unstable and they might fall. So you need to organize your groups, your circuits, so that you are going to maximize their safety and minimize the chance that they will fall. So whether that's using, a bar that's on the wall, or using the wall, or using partners, or a chair to hold on to, whatever it might be, make sure that you are really focused on being safe. We've taken things for granted at different times. All of us have. I've done it. We had one client that we were doing a vestibular test on, and we had him stand up on 2 foam pads and close his eyes to assess his vestibular system. And we didn't think, he was so healthy and fit, we just assumed he didn't have a problem. And he got up there and fell over like a tree. We had to catch him before he hit his head on the dumbbell rack. So, it was stupid that we weren't spotting appropriately, stupid that we had him next to the dumbbell rack where if he did fall, he was going to hurt himself. It was, you can never assume. You always have to be diligent about your safety. So that was really going to help. So let's look at some of these functional circuits. Again, these can be applied in groups, or they can be applied one-on-one. And so we're going to just quickly run through 4 different levels of circuits, with level 1 being that lower independent, or maybe that frail individual, and then up to level 4, which would be a more fit individual. And just look at some of the changes that occur in the exercises themselves. So if you're working with somebody that's lower functioning, then basic strength and power is certainly going to be an issue. Basic mobility, basic balance. Okay, these are all things that we want to focus on. And so you'll see that as we go through the exercises, I have them grouped in groups of 4. And you don't have to do this, but I really like doing this because, again, we're trying to be very efficient with our time and try to keep things moving and get a lot accomplished in a short amount of time. So what do? Well, we are going to then focus on different types of exercises in order to accomplish different things. So if we look at kind of this first grouping here of exercises, okay, then the first grouping of exercises that we see is going to really focus on strength and power. Then we're going to look at something that's pretty simple, such as balance. Then we're going to look at another strength exercise, and then another balance exercise. So the chair stands and the power stands are exercise it's an exercise that requires a lot of strength, a little bit more intensity. We might do that for 20 seconds. We might do it for 30 seconds. Like for a power stand, they're trying to stand up and sit down as many times as they can in 20 or 30 seconds. And that's going to get them breathing. They're going to get kind of tired from that. And so instead of just resting afterwards, we can go straight into a balance exercise in order to help them catch their breath. So we'll go to something like a tandem walk, okay? Then we might go to a standing 2-arm tubing chest press, right? And so because of that, we are going to vary our lower body strength and our upper body strength. So again, our lower body is able to rest while we go to an upper body strength exercise, and then we're going to go to the one-legged stand with eyes open. So again, another balance exercise. So we're able to mix it up. We're going to use our rest periods very diligently and appropriately and purposefully so that we don't lose that time and it stays very efficient. Okay, so some of the other exercises that you can see, and you can use these, with your clients and get out there and practice them and just kind of see how they fit together. And then you'll notice, of course, at the end is we have the bridge and bird dog exercises, which are floor exercises. So some very basic core low back stability exercises for these lower functioning individuals. Now, of course, depending on how low functioning they are, some people are not going to be able to get down on the floor and back up again. So that's something you obviously have to take into consideration and maybe have to approach it from a different perspective. So now if we look at our level 2 function, we'll see that this is kind of a middle function group. And so now we're going to mix it up a little bit, and we're going to start to then take away some stability, look at some different stance positions, but again, we're going to focus on mixing it up between some higher intensity movements with some lower intensity movements. So that might be, a strength and power exercise, and then more of a balanced or stabilizing exercise, right? And we can kind of go back and forth with those. And so I really like that approach, because again, it makes it very, very efficient to be able to do our training with. If we then look at the next circuit, the level 3 circuit, then we see that the level 3 circuit is taking it up just a little bit more. It becomes more dynamic. We can even add in that plank exercise there at the end in order to focus on that core stability, and you see I've spread that out over kind of these 3 little groupings of exercises. These are things that you can go through one grouping and then go through them back again immediately, or you go through all the groupings and then go back, start from the top and go through them again. You can really mix it up any way you want. But again, when I take my checklist of functional domains and I look at all these different functional domains, then I can see, okay, I can check a lot of different functional domains off by doing these exercises. Now, these are just examples, obviously, so they might not fit into a full 30-minute time slot, depending on how many sets you do. You might have to expand on them, depending on what your purpose is, etc. But again, if you take something like the karaoke exercise, where you're moving laterally, but you step in front, you cross over your legs, one in front, then you cross over behind, you go in front, go behind, you keep alternating that way. And I've had, I don't know how many clients that just could not do that exercise. They're fit, they seem pretty functional, they can't do karaoke to save their life. Okay, and so there's a basic motor control and coordination aspect that they have to work on. And so even as I'm working with clients, there are things that are going to come up and surface as we try these exercises to hit on these different domains that I might not have been able to focus on in an assessment environment. But now I see, oh wow, motor control and coordination, crossing the midline, that's a big issue for this individual. And so I might try some other things in that same category for that person, and really through the exercise, make the exercise part of my qualitative assessment of them, right? It's not like I'm writing numbers down. It's not a formal assessment, but always qualitatively I'm assessing them and seeing what they need. Okay? When we move up to then a high-functioning individual, almost the sky is the limit kind of thing. But we still want to keep following those principles of functional training, and we still want to make it very high-level, three-dimensional training, lots of core stabilization that we're working on during different dynamic movement activities, okay? And so now we reduce base of support. We can manipulate a lot of different aspects of exercises to tweak them, to tweak in or to tweak out different aspects of function. So if we look at some of our programming strategies, as an example, is you can look at something such as even pace, or the rest periods that you use, or the time intervals that you're using. You can think about, how do I manipulate the complexity of an exercise if I really do want to get more motor control and coordination or agility or proprioception, as an example. And so a lot of different levels of manipulation that can be accomplished in order to address those different functional domains in some very, very specific ways. And of course, then using partners and partner drills makes it more fun, or even having the whole group, do something together and collectively can be a lot of fun as well. Ultimately, I really like using then obstacle courses as part of my circuits as well, because if people are doing obstacle courses, then they can be working on a myriad of different components, and adding that speed component to it then makes them really have to work hard, work quickly, respond to different commands, and it makes it a lot of fun. It feels more like a game then. So that's just kind of some different ways that we can apply these functional circuits and these different functional movements in either a one-on-one or a small group type of environment. But keep in mind that when we think about small group, we are still thinking about that small group personal training. I don't want you to think of small group as you're standing in the middle of the room and you're barking out something, change, and people are changing a station, and you really don't have a lot of interaction and involvement with them. That's not the kind of small group training that's really personalized or individualized, and it doesn't keep you kind of really able to be engaged in all of the clients and what's going on. You don't want to turn your back on these clients. So keep them kind of in front of you and together so that you can always provide instruction and feedback and motivation for them, and not just kind of I'm in the middle of the room and people are going around the edge and you're kind of a drill instructor. Some people like that, certainly, and that can work in certain environments, but I think for the mature client and this different type of client who we're trying to tap into, it doesn't work as well. So if you are interested in our functional aging specialist certification, you can get CECs from a lot of different organizations for it. It's about a 10-hour course. About 5 hours of that are video instruction, and so it takes anywhere from 15 to 20 hours probably to get ready for the online exam. But please check that out. We'd love to have you. Well, thank you so much for your time and attention. This is being recorded, so you'll be able to access this later on. And if you have any other questions, you can always contact me at my email address. That's contact@functionalaginginstitute.com. So contact@functionalaginginstitute.com, and we will get back with you. So thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance.